Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to our Iditarod 2021 coverage here on KVRF 89.7 in the Matsu Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site, and of course you can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I know a lot of you have, wherever you're listening to this podcast, and you'll get a notice as soon as a show drops, and you won't have to ask, I wonder when these guys are going to drop their next show. So tonight I have my co-host, Tony Ryder, calling in from Kenai, Alaska, and Alex Stein calling in from Southern California. Tony, how's it going tonight?
Going pretty well. It was an early morning.
It sounds like it's an early morning for every diehard Iditarod fan for sure. Alex, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well too. I actually set my alarm because I knew I would fall asleep, so I set my alarm and woke up in time to watch Dallas come in this morning.
Well, you know, we all must be tired because I asked you, how are you doing this morning? And here it is, 6 o'clock at night. So it's been
and I didn't even hear that. So.
I didn't either. He could have gotten away with it, but he had to tattle on himself.
It's been a wild ride for sure, especially for the top 11 teams. We have 11 teams that are at the finish now at Deshka Landing at early this morning, way before the light of day. We had our Iditarod champion, Dallas Seavey, came in for his 5th Iditarod championship, and we're going to let Tony kick off the show tonight. What can you tell us about this monumental finish for Dallas Seavey and the whole Seavey dynasty that's still going on?
Well, you know, just trying to win a 5th title for any of the 4-time champions has seemingly been cursed. Rick Swenson, of course, won back in the 90s, his 5th title. Couldn't win another one. Not really sure he was trying all that hard sometimes, but you had mushers like Doug Swingley who came in and tried for a 5th and ended up freezing his corneas. You had Jeff King, of course, came closest, I think, of all of the 4-time champions. And we saw what happened to him in 2014, which Dallas went on to win. So that was in, I think, the back of everyone's mind. And it certainly sounded like it was in the forefront of Dallas's mind as he was getting closer and closer to Deshka Landing in the last 2 days. He told the news reporters at the finish that he was just waiting for that really random thing to happen or a mistake. And he was just hoping that the ponies were that really random thing where the ponies were trying to steal the hay from underneath his dogs. It sounds like the horses started a fight with the dogs, which started chaos. And then it was just a lot of people running around trying to get these horses away from these dogs. And what a nightmare. And I'm sure in that moment, Dallas was just like, this is it. I'm a 4-time champion. That's nothing to be upset about. I think it all really culminated Dallas coming back after really having a rough few years professionally with the doping scandal and everything surrounding that. And then his personal life also had some difficulties. He let the world know earlier this year that he had gone through a divorce. So he really was trying to, I think, regain that footing and that passion and just that love for doing this race or any race. We saw that glimmer when he was in Norway, but certainly seeing him out here and taking full command of the race that he has studied literally his entire life, it felt a lot like the old Dallas was back. So it's a nice thing that his dad decided to take the year off and said, Junior, you can go ahead and take some of my dogs on the Iditarod. But clearly Dallas has not skipped a beat. So seeing him come in and be greeted by his dad, Mitch, who is a 3-time Iditarod champion himself, and then, of course, his grandfather, Dan Seavey, who ran the first Iditarod, came in third there and was actually instrumental in getting the Iditarod off the ground to begin with. So he's part of Iditarod history. He's part of Iditarod culture. I don't think he had much of a choice. He was kind of born into it, but he certainly chose to take it and run with it, literally. So it was nice to see.
That he did. And Alex, we were talking right before air. You said it looked quite a bit different than your typical Iditarod finish. We talked a little bit about that last night, but can you set up the scene for us? Because I know you had that alarm set to get up bright and early to watch that. So what was happening as the folks finished? Obviously, the burled arch wasn't there. And obviously the reason it wasn't, because not only is it huge, but there would be no way to get it down here without taking it apart and moving it around and putting it on a plane at this time to to bring that down here and use that as the finish line. So set the scene for us. What did it look like? And of course, it's still Iditarod, so they still had tons of media and pictures and interviews and all that, right?
Yeah, there's a chute with snow, a snowy chute. And then they had the banner, which is, in normal years, the banner is the same for both the start and the finish. And there's just like a little part on the bottom that says either start or finish, but the main part of it is the same. And so that was up, and there were, there were what seemed to be maybe 60 or 75 people there, which is not a lot compared to most finishes. And, Mark Nordman was there, the race marshal, and a bunch of vets and race officials and family members, as Tony said. And then they got a little stand or something where Dallas could sit with his 2 lead dogs, and they took that picture of the Musher and the 2 lead dogs that you always see at the end of Iditarod. And there was some press there, and they interviewed him. But it all seemed very, very low key. There was no siren that went off to warn us that he was coming in. I think there was somebody who sort of said, dog team's going to come in soon. And then, like a minute later, the dog team would come down the chute. So, it's a little sad for me, to be honest, because this is such an enormous accomplishment, no matter what year it is and no matter what place you come in. And, Dallas has won 4 times before this, so he's gotten a lot of that acclaim and a lot of people cheering for him. But it did make me feel a little bit sad that there weren't more people there when he came in.
Interesting. And here's a question that I do not know the answer to. I know if it wasn't this year, it could have been towards the end of last year, the local car dealership that provided the truck pulled out as a sponsor. Is that still happening this year? Did they present him with the extra size key like they usually do?
I don't believe they did. I don't believe that they've found anyone to replace the truck sponsor. And in a lot of years, that is a $40,000 or $45,000 truck. So, to get that on top of whatever the prize money works out to, last year it was almost $60,000. It's been 75 some years. Usually around 50 for the winner. So yeah, that's a substantial thing that people are not getting.
Interesting. Tony, I think I saw a post from you about this earlier today about the golden harness dogs that the mushers pick at the end. And they can pick any dog. It doesn't necessarily have to be lead dogs, but Dallas had a couple of special dogs up there, one in particular. Do you know that story?
Are we talking about Gamble, the oldest lead dog?
Yes, yes.
to have won 2 Iditarods with a gap of, I guess, 3 years. It's the longest gap between lead dogs winning, I guess, the Yellow Roses.
Yeah, that's a really cool award for them to bestow on the dogs. And I say it all the time. This is all about the dogs. Of course, the mushers get all the notoriety because they are the people that we can put a face to, as they say. But the dogs are the ones in my book that are the big time winners. And I'm glad that Gamble has such an illustrious career. That's a big, big accomplishment for a sled dog, because folks that may not know, the prime years for a racing sled dog, in particular an Iditarod sled dog, is about 6 years, especially if you're a highly competitive team. So with that being the case, with Gamble finishing 2, that's a big accomplishment. Tony, do you happen to know how old Gamble is?
Gamble is 8 years old, and it's not the first time Dallas has had a quote-unquote older dog just really shine in Iditarod. His first Iditarod, one of the dogs that ran with him and got the Yellow Roses was a dog named Guinness. And I want to say she was 8 or 9 years old when she won, too. So it's always nice, and he makes such a big deal over the older dogs that have been with him pretty much from the start of his career as a competitive musher, not necessarily as a musher in the Iditarod, but when he decided he was going to be competitive and he was going to become a champion. And so to have him, that was one of the main things that he kept saying this morning, was he wanted it noted that Gamble was as old as he was and had made this accomplishment. So just going back with what you said, that it's really about the dog.
Right.
I don't know many mushers that would disagree with you.
I definitely know that for sure. So one more thing here before we get into some of the other meat and potatoes of the race. I'm looking right now, Alex, at the average speed for the top teams that came in, with Dallas at 4.57, and then you work your way down to 11th place was 4.30. Do you happen to know if that's faster or slower in terms of miles per hour over the course of the race compared to normal years? Typically an Iditarod is somewhere in that 6-7 mile an hour range on the trail, but this also equates for everything else. Is that right?
Yeah, it seems to me, and I would have to go back and check this, but it seems that it might be a little bit slower. But that's just my gut instinct. I'm not sure that that's right.
Okay.
Because I remember it being, I remember in past years it being closer to 5.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I think too. But, when people think about, 4.5 miles an hour, I can walk faster than that. But remember, this is over massive terrain. Of course, they're pulling sleds, and this does include stops and rests and all of that to get that average speed. Sometimes, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, sometimes that speed is almost 0, and sometimes it's 11, 12 miles an hour. So that average speed at 4.57 for Dallas is over the entire course of the race. So as we speak right now, it looks like Aaron, Brent, Wade, Millie, Nick Petit, Ryan Reddington, Richie Deal, Ramey Smith, and Michelle Phillips have crossed, I want to say under the arch, but over the finish line as we speak. And at the back of the pack, we have the same folks that were there last night with Larry Doherty, Hal Hansen, Victoria Hardwick, Dakota Schlossler, and Will Troshinsky pulling up the lead there, and they are either in Rhone or in Nikolai and getting ready to leave, which leads us into our next segment. And that was some of the stories that we heard about going over the Dizelle Gorge backwards, and in particular the story of Dallas and Ryan Reddington. What do you know about Ryan's quest to get over that gorge, Alex?
Yeah, Ryan had a very, very difficult time, and he said that at one point he said that he barely got through going over the Happy River steps. And he said if it had been any steeper or any longer, that he would still be there. He was saying that he had a lot of weight in his sled, and there were times that he was down on his hands and knees pushing because he couldn't get any traction, and he couldn't really stand up and stand on the runners, and he was having trouble being able to, stand beside the sled and go with it. So it's interesting because watching it on the tracker, it seemed like most of the teams just sort of moved through it. It didn't seem like it was all that difficult. They were going a little bit more slowly, but you'd expect that going uphill. But now that they have been through, we're starting to hear some of these reports about how incredibly difficult it was. And I sort of naively assumed ahead of time, well, it won't be as bad as going down, because going down, it's usually, people report that it's, you just hang on for dear life. And at least if you're going up, you'd be going more slowly and have control of it. But apparently it was just very, very, very steep. And I think that probably the weather and some of the icy conditions made it even more difficult.
And Dallas pretty much said the same thing, and I know a couple of other reports were very similar to that. Interestingly enough, Brenda Mackey, who we talked about earlier in her coverage, she had to drop out because a lot of her dogs got sick, which is a big story on the Iditarod this year. But her dogs got sick going out. As a matter of fact, they got sick in Squetna, so only about 70 miles in. They were having a real tough time. She is home. All the dogs are home. But I say that because she wrote an excellent blog post this morning about just what it was like as a rookie heading down. I think she scratched in Rhone, so she went through the steps and the gorge and all of that. If you get a chance, guys, head over to Brenda Mackey's blog and take a read of that. What an interesting story. She was telling us pretty much a play-by-play of what was happening between the start and where she had to scratch. But yes, she is doing well and she is home, but it's good to read those trail reports. I love reading those articles. I'm sure you do too, don't you, Tony?
Yeah, definitely. And it's really kind of hard to keep up with it in the days leading up to the finish, especially the last 24 hours for me, because you're just focused on those little trackers and willing them to move faster so that you don't have to have a finish in the middle of the night. And they never listen to me, and I'm still upset about it. But I did see, I guess she spoke with Meredith Mapes, who, of course, is an Iditarod veteran. And she told Meredith that, everybody talks about all of the hills and the mountains in the quest. They never tell you about how many hills there are in Iditarod. And she said there are more hills in Iditarod than there are in the quest, at least for her memory. And I sat there going, you didn't even make it halfway, and you're saying there's more hills than in the quest. That, to me, was pretty impressive.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Speaking of hills, Tony, I know we've talked about this on this show before, and we're going to digress just a little bit. But I remember when I ran the Tustamina 200 several years ago, and all of my musher friends were saying, "Oh, there's just a few hills that you have to go to from Kasilov to Homer." Those are mountains. Those are absolute mountains. And I tell you what, that was some of the hardest mushing I've ever done. So I can only imagine what's on the Quest and what's on the Iditarod. Maybe one day I will find out. But when somebody says hills, it's probably mountains for sure. So,
well, there's also a lot of mushers will tend to kind of downplay some of the things that they experience.
Yeah.
And even after going back up through the gorge and through the steps this year, there were a bunch of mushers who were just very blasé about it and said, yeah, it was different to go up. And, knowing how much trouble some of them had. And, I can only imagine, I said on Twitter that the other night you were talking about, a musher who does ultra marathons for fun. And I think that just hearing you say that sentence, I pulled a muscle in my leg.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, we were talking about Brenda Mackey's trail report and her blog, and it was so timely. I mean, it was within a couple of days of her being out of the race. And I'm sure you're very well of this, Tony, but often we don't get these trail report blogs till sometime in June, July, August, do we?
Yeah, and I think it's a lot to do with just they have to come down off of the Iditarod high, I guess would be the word. First of all, they have to sleep. But then, it takes, I think, the mushers a while to decompress and just be able to go through and really remember and absorb what they've learned or what they experienced. And I don't know, I think sometimes, like for the Dalzell Gorge and stuff, they need time to process that and make it less traumatic in their memory. But yeah, no, it's really nice to see how many people are being really proactive and really making sure that the fans hear the stories. And I don't know if that's been encouraged because we couldn't have as many journalists out there this year. I don't know if that's something that the collective mushing community or Iditarod community is doing on their own to kind of bring about awareness to this sport and to really set the tone for what this year was like. But it's really been encouraging to see how active the mushers and their teams are. They've been really good at keeping communication with the fans throughout the race.
Yeah, for sure. And when you do get a chance to read some of these trail stories, I highly encourage it. There's a heck of a lot of good writers out there in the mushing community. They tell great stories, and some people do it day by day, play by play, and others just kind of give a summary, but they're all very good stories. Alex, before we jump over to our musher profile, we have a couple of quick stories. We have a scratch, and we have an update about Gunnar Johnson and his quest to get the names of some suicide victims down the trail. Tell us about the scratch first.
Yeah, so we have I believe it is Jeremy Traska, who we talked about a little bit yesterday, who scratched in Nikolai. He only had 9 dogs on his team, and as we've discussed in the past couple of days, it seems like at least before you get back over the Alaska range, any team that has under 10 dogs has been kind of in danger this year. And we've seen a bunch of teams that got down to 8 or 9 dogs relatively quickly and then would scratch the next day. And so that seems to be what happened with Jeremy. I haven't heard any other specific details about it.
And what about Gunnar Johnson's quest with the suicide notes?
Right. So when Gunnar was withdrawn for testing positive for COVID, he had this. He was carrying with him this list of names, and he really wanted the list of names to go all the way through the Iditarod and get to the end. So he handed them off to Nick Petit, who then carried these names all the way to the finish. And I believe there is going to be a ceremony later where the names will be burned to release release the spirits of these people and to just sort of be a positive, energetic experience. And then the plan was to put the ashes in a river where they would eventually go out to the sea.
Very interesting. I'm glad that was able to do it. And a lot of mushers have, I don't want to say quests, but causes that they mush for, whether it be suicide prevention or alcoholism or domestic abuse or diabetes or whatever. A lot of folks do this, and I think it's a great way to raise awareness, especially in today's social media climate with just so many eyes on everybody with what's happening, not only on the trail, but also during the time of on and off, that lead up and of course afterwards. So thankfully he was able to finish his quest for his cause, and he can feel good about it getting to the finish line. Let's talk about the musher profile of the evening. We're talking about Chad Stoddard, and it looks like, as we speak right now, he will be our Rookie of the Year winner, and that means, I believe, almost always that it's the first rookie to finish that receives that award. Is that right, before we get into it, Alex?
I believe that's right. Do you know, Tony?
Yep, that's basically one of the main ways to get the rookie, or not ways, but that's the main reason you get it.
Yeah. And, we had, all three of us had predicted either Dakota or Brenda Mackey would be Rookie of the Year. So I hope nobody put any money down on any of those predictions.
Right.
Also on my ever-changing prediction about when Dallas would come in, which was wrong and then more wrong and then wronger. Anyway,
I feel like he did it on purpose.
He may have. Chad is 32. He was born in Anchorage, went to college down in Washington State, and then afterwards came back up. A longtime friend of his said that he was really destined to become a musher because he had a Van Zyl painting of a dog team above his bed when he was a kid, and his great-grandfather used to deliver mail by dog sled in Nenana. So with a background like that, I think you don't really have a choice. You have to get on the runners. He has also worked as a commercial fisherman based out of Petersburg. He first handled for Billy Snodgrass, an Iditarod vet in Wyoming, and has done guided tours at the Alaska Icefield expeditions. He's been mushing for about 7 years, and in 2018, he moved up to Fairbanks and was handling for Lance Mackey and did his qualifiers for the most part with teams from Lance's comeback kennel. He put together recently his own team and his own kennel. He said on the trail he likes to listen to Radiohead, Queen, Jimi Hendrix, Waylon Jennings, and a group called Trampled by Turtles, which I confess I've never heard of. I'm just not that hip. And he has dogs. He has his own kennel now, and he has dogs that he's gotten mostly from Torsten Konert, Sven Haltman, and Lance Mackey. And the dogs that he started with were Mummy and Idaho in lead, and then Baloo, Trouble, Ellie, Little Man, Scott, Diego, Huxley, Twain, and Kafka, which is obviously from a literary litter, Bohannon, Elam, and Durant. And he did this great interview with The Insider where he was talking about Elam and Durant, who are his two wheel dogs. And we pay a lot of attention in this race to the leaders, but we don't really pay that much attention to some of the team and some of the wheel dogs. And he said that Elam is 5 years old, is very, very powerful, extremely affectionate, and very cute. And Durant just has this attitude that he shouldn't have to work that hard. So he is very efficient, but doesn't really go out of his way to expend a lot of energy. And he's got like a really heavy coat, and he's a relatively dark dog, so He does very, very well in really cold temperatures. And Chad said that he pretty much looks the same at the end of any race as he does at the beginning. Chad has 13 of his 14 dogs still in harness. He's currently in 22nd place. He's been running a lot over the past day or day and a half with the Barrington twins. And he is just having what seems to be an almost perfect rookie run. He's currently in Finger Lake resting and has about a little over 100 miles until he gets to the finish. So he's a very even-tempered guy. He's one of these people who, when you ask him how it's going, he'll say, "Oh, it's fine." And then when you press a little bit harder, he'll tell you about like astonishing things that have happened to him on the trail, which is a common thing for a lot of mushers. But he is doing very, very well. I'm impressed that he has this kennel and this team that he put together from a bunch of different places and has been able to get them all to work together as a team. And, 22nd place is very, very good, especially for a rookie. Mm-hmm. So he's having a really wonderful race, and I believe sometime in the next 24 hours or so, he'll cross the finish line in Deshka.
I don't know a whole lot about Chad except for what you said, Alex, but I do have to say that if you have not listened to Trampled by Turtles, it's somebody you ought to check out, Alex. You might kind of feel groovy by listening to him.
Okay. What kind of music is Trampled by Turtles?
It's kind of folkish, that Dave Matthews Band type music.
Okay.
So not bad.
Right.
Not bad at all.
Good music to have when you're out on the trail and you've got another 40 or 50 miles to go and you just want to be down the trail.
Yeah, I'm kind of partial to heavy metal and reggae, but hey, if Trampled by Turtles works for Chad, I think it'll work for anybody. Tony, do you have any stories about Chad? Do you know him at all?
I don't know him. I've chatted with his mom a few times over Twitter over the last couple of years, and she's very excited and very proud, as she should be, especially this year. It was really cute when they did all of the rookie interviews in McGrath when Liz was doing her live interviews while everybody was resting. And she always asks the musher, "Is there anybody at home that you want to say hello to?" And before he could say anything, the insider camera guy was like, "Well, his mom's in the chat right now and she says hi." So then they were having like this little conversation back and forth, and it was probably one of my favorite moments in McGrath. So that's really the only Chad story. If you want to find out a little bit about him, or at least about his dog, he's pretty active on Instagram, which is where a lot of the younger I say younger, and he's not that much younger than me, but where some of the newer mushers, the rookie mushers, are really hanging out this year seems to be Instagram. They really like to show off their dogs in their stories. So definitely check him out there, because you do get kind of a sense of what his team looks like.
Yeah, he also has a Facebook page, which he almost never updates. So I think the last thing on his Facebook page is from January, and then before that, it's maybe October.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody's saying, well, how in the world am I supposed to find all of these profiles, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook? And we just so happen to have a really good blog post by our own Tony Ryder, not only on our show notes page, but also on her blog, which lists every one of these links. And I encourage everybody that's listening. And guys, we've had almost 100,000 downloads as we speak. So a heck of a lot of people have listened. So if 100,000 people go like and share and watch these people's social media pages, I guarantee that will bring a smile to all of their faces for sure. So definitely go check that out for sure. So guys, we are 1 day into the finishes now. We still have a few more days to go. We're projecting sometime Wednesday or early Thursday that everybody will be in, and we will be on the air until then. But Alex or Tony, let's have Alex go first. Is there anything else you want to mention before we go?
Yeah, I would like to once again say how unbelievably accomplished all of these mushers and their dogs are. And I'm talking about everyone who's qualified, everyone who had to scratch, every dog who was returned. This is just a remarkable thing, and I don't want to lose sight of that. And I don't want to lose sight of the fact that the person who comes in as the Red Lantern, or the person who's like second to last, has accomplished more in these 10 days or 11 days or whatever it turns out to be than most people will do in a great part of their lives. So we're spending a lot of time, especially now, talking about the people at the front of the pack, but I just admire so much anyone who gets to Iditarod, and no matter how they do, and anyone who finishes.
Here for sure on that one. Tony, close us out. Anything you want to add?
I definitely want to kind of piggyback off of what Alex just said and really encourage people. I know it's really easy once the top 10 come in to just kind of click off of Insider, click off of the news sources, and go back to regular life, go back to sleeping a normal schedule. But there are so many other teams still out on the trail. And like we said at the beginning of the show, there's not a whole lot of people welcoming them in, any of them. And it keeps dwindling down as we get further and further away from the top mushers. So, go use the social media links that we have on my blog. Go in and just give them a shout out. Their family members can see it, and they'll definitely see it when they do come into the finish line and get to actually have a moment to look at their pages. And just really celebrate everybody, because they just ran an incredibly difficult race. They spent the night in 55 below zero in and around Ophir. I don't do that, and I was born and raised in Alaska, so it's a completely different breed of dog and breed of person out there, and they all deserve our celebration.
Excellent, for sure. Definitely follow all these guys. And again, it's on our show notes at dogworksradio.com, which will shoot you over to Tony's blog with all of that for sure. So on behalf of my co-host tonight, Tony Ryder and Alex Stein, this is Robert Forto for Mushing Radio. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, please, so you will get noticed every time we drop a show. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Goodbye.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.